Okay. So good morning to all of you. Well, I am Grace. I'm a Bourbon Day missionary, and I suppose you all received the message introducing me in your soul. So I suppose that's enough for now, for you to know me. So I am happy to be here and share with you. And this is my first time giving guidelines to CTK ZOW. So welcome to all of you, especially for the first timers like me. So we will start with an input today, which is usually a reflection on Sunday's reading in the Mass. And after my preaching, we will have 30 minutes of prayer, followed by group sharing at the end. And we encourage you to stay on till the end of this show. Feel free to share or just listen in the group sharing if you don't want to share at this moment. So we know that the School of the Word comes in a package. It is nice if we can take advantage of these 2 hours to learn from one another and to grow together as faith community. So I would like to start with a question. Usually I start my sharing with a question, sometimes with a story. But today I decided to start with a question. Have you ever felt being poor? Or a follow-up question could be, have you experienced poverty? According to Britannica, poverty is the state of one who lacks a usual or socially acceptable amount of money or material possessions. So when we think of poverty or being poor, we think of someone who live in shanty house, who cannot afford to eat maybe 3 times a day, no education. But poverty has a very broad meaning. It's not just about having enough money. It is also about being marginalized, when your rights are not being respected, when you don't have power, when you don't have voice, etc. But most importantly, there is a poverty that we experience by the fact that we are all human beings. We are not God. We are creatures, and we are dependent on our Creator. We have limitations, we have vulnerabilities, weaknesses, or inability, etc. This makes us, in one way or another, poor. While we might initially answer no when we heard the question that I posed a while ago, we might think twice when we go deeper into what poverty really means for us. When we feel being poor, we know that it is much deeper, because we all feel and experience being poor, being in need, when we see that what we have is not enough. So this is what the people of in the readings that we will pray experience. Actually, in the first reading, this is the reading of Elisha, and the servant of Elisha objected to what he said. Elisha was telling him, give the people these 20 barley loaves to eat. But the servant objected. How can I see, how can I feed these people, hundreds of them, with just this loaf of bread? And in the gospel, we see the disciples experiencing the same. The gospel for this Sunday is in John 6, 1 to 15. And we see Jesus here coming to the disciples, coming to Philip. And he asked Philip, where can we buy enough food for these people? And Philip answered him, 200 days wages worth of food would not be enough for. There were so many people, and it says in that passage that there were 5,000 people all in all. So they were in front of a hungry crowd, not hundreds, but thousands. And they really felt powerless. They were resourceless in this moment. There are moments in our life when we feel like the disciples, perhaps not feeling poor materially, but in so many ways. Perhaps there are situations where we cannot control, especially in this time of pandemic. People are getting sick, our loved ones are getting infected. When sometimes there are so many situations happening in our family, there are things that just slip out of our hands. And we feel vulnerable, we feel helpless, and we can't do anything, even if we have all the resources. Sometimes we feel that whatever we do seems not enough. I'm sure that all of you have all these experiences. And what do we do in this time? Last year, before the lockdown in March, my father was brought to the emergency. I live here in Tagaytay, and my family are just 30 minutes away. So when he was brought to the emergency, I went to the hospital to be with him. And yeah, we're just with my father. But after 2 weeks, he was brought again to the emergency, and this time we were all in hard lockdown. It was after March 20. And all the borders were closed. There were checkpoints, even from here to Silang. I can't just go like that, because I need to have documents. I need to have permission in the local government and all that. So his situation got worse and worse. He was declared PUI because he had pneumonia. He had to be brought to another from one hospital to another. And of course, my first reaction was to go there. And I did all my best in order to be there with my father, to help my sisters with the situation. And really, I was even going to the counselor in our barangay. I wanted to write to the mayor so that she could let me. I went to so many people asking how could I go to Silang and to be there with my father. And I remember I was so desperate because I didn't know what will happen with my father. I didn't know if he had COVID or what, and he was very fragile, very sick at that time. So I was really very helpless. And I remember one phone call I had with my sister, and she told me in Tagalog, wag mo nang pilitin. And for me, when she told me that, wag mo nang pilitin, it was like, it's a moment of surrendering, surrendering, and is to place the life of my father in God's hands. And I may not be able to see him. I may not, because the situation was very fragile. But these were the moments. One of my experiences, where I felt so helpless, so poor, that I can't do anything. That whatever I do seems not enough. And so I stayed until he was brought out from the hospital. He stayed in hospital for 3 weeks. And it was very hard, because we were still in lockdown at that time. And when they eased a little bit the lockdown, I was able to visit a little bit my father. After 3 months, he was very weak and he really deteriorated. But finally, he passed away in June last year. And that was also a moment of, very difficult for me, because when my sister called me that my father already passed away. I rushed back home. He was in the funeral parlor, but he was already in the back, because the hospital declared him as PUI, even though he didn't have COVID. Um, and I didn't see, I didn't see my father anymore. I didn't see his body. He was just wrapped in a bag, and we had to make a very tough decision whether to bury him the following day, or cremate him. Of course, here in the Philippines, cremation is not so common. No? For my family, we never had that experience. No, but for me to also suggest that to my siblings, to go for cremation was also a tough one. No? Because for me, I mean, at least if we cremate our father, we will still have his urn with us for a few days. And that is what we did. And for me, that time was really an experience of poverty inside. But it was also an experience of, trusting, trusting in God. So I hope in all the experiences that we have like this, of not knowing what to do, of not, not controlling the situation, we might really experience that we are trusting in God. I hope you can still hear me because the rain is quite hard here. So what do we do in this situation? How do we leave those situations of poverty? Do we become frustrated because we can't give more, or we don't have more, we can't do more? Or do we trust in God more? How do we live that experience of poverty when it touches really our flesh and bones? Because, I mean, as human beings, we like to control. It's difficult sometimes to surrender or abandon our lives to God or to someone. Maybe you all have responsibilities as bosses, as parents, as son, daughter, or employer, employee. And we at times face situation where all what we've got are 5 loaves and 2 fishes. This is the reading for today. And we might also experience issues, another marital issues that is not easy to manage, family issues that are not easy to solve, or baggages from the past that seem to weigh us down so much. I remember I was talking with a lady 2 weeks ago, and she felt so helpless, because she had problem with the husband, and the husband told her directly, I will not change anymore. And for her, it was like, like a bomb that was thrown to her, because she really felt that she can't do anymore for the marriage, and she felt helpless. So in front of all these situations that we might be experiencing, sometimes our 5 loaves and 2 fishes are not enough. Not enough to feed our family, not enough to feed our perhaps friends with love, not enough to satisfy the needs of our loved ones, not enough for what is really needed. And so in this passage in John 6 verse 5, we see Jesus approaching Philip. And he asked this question, where can we buy enough food to feed the people? What can we do? How can we share this bread to people? And these perhaps are the questions that God can share to us in prayer. How can they experience my love? How can they leave this situation? And he approached us and he asked us, what can we do with the situation of this person? How can we satisfy their hunger and thirst? And these questions that Jesus asked the disciples is awakening in them the sensitivity that he has for the people. And this is the same thing that he is doing to us in prayer. Now he's awakening in us that same sensitivity that he has now for our loved ones, for the people who really need us. And we know that God will always provide for us. Jesus was teaching the disciples what to do when they see themselves lacking bread. And he implicitly asked Philip, where can we buy some bread for these people to eat? Of course, he says in that passage that he was just testing Philip. What will we do if we don't have enough bread to give? And this bread can be patience, can be understanding, can be our time, can be forgiveness, etc. Sometimes in front of such a great task, we feel inadequate to help Jesus to feed the world, to feed our family, to feed people around us. And like the disciples, we may also say, we have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish. What is that in this situation that I am facing? It's too little, it's not enough. It is very easy to get nervous when we see the need, when we see the problem or the situation of the people. When we rely on our human judgment and resources, we can easily become overwhelmed and frantic when we cannot meet the demands. And we can all have, the human calculations. It's too difficult. It's too much inversion of time, of money. I don't think I can. There's no solution. And we can have thousands of alibis. The disciples have their logic, have their reasoning. They already calculated, and they have their solution. We have only much of bread and fish, and they are certainly not enough. And I was thinking, well, they were 5,000 men, and usually, here in the retreat house, when we feed men, we double the serving because we know that they eat double. So 5,000 means 10,000 people to eat. So in John's Gospel, Jesus provoked this dialogue with Philip. In my Bible, it has a commentary there that Jesus did it to test Philip because he actually knew what he was going to do. And Jesus asked, where can we buy enough food? Actually, Jesus was asking where. He was not asking how much it would cost. So they have, different way of solving the need of the people. And sometimes, perhaps we limit ourselves in what we can do and what God can do with our lives because we might just, assess the physical. We see the huge gap between what we have and the needs of the mission, and we project it to others as well. And we see here also in the passage that Andrew encountered this boy who had 5 loaves and 2 fish. And we can imagine this boy hearing the conversation of Philip and Jesus, and he offered his food. But Andrew said, what you have is not enough. Don't be too ambitious. And as I was reflecting in the passage, I was realizing that maybe God answers us to others, others who are poor like us or poorer like us. This boy has barley loaves, and it's actually the poorest kind of bread that a person can have because normally it's wheat bread. So this boy is really, really very poor. And it might be really very humbling experience for the disciples because the boy who offered what he had perhaps have more faith than the disciples. And so what did Jesus do? He took the 5 loaves and 2 fish of that boy to show to the disciples that nothing is impossible if we offer him what we have, because he will actually multiply them. And this is where we see the providence of God. God provides, and He sees our resources, and from there, He enriches us. He didn't see what they lack, but He saw what they have, and He gave thanks to them. Jesus is giving thanks for what we have, little it may be. Jesus was teaching the disciples that they need only to offer what they have, and together with Him, they can feed the people. And really, Jesus doesn't know mathematics and how to calculate. Now, the disciples were very calculative, but as Archbishop Van Tuan said, he's one of my favorite cardinal, a Vietnamese. He said in one of his writings or preaching, I have left everything to follow Jesus because I love Jesus's defects. Because Jesus doesn't have memory, ignorant of mathematics, and he doesn't have idea of economics. I like it very much, because he was, Bantuan is a very down-to-earth person, but he died already. But he says that Jesus has defects because he loves. And real love does not reason or calculate. It places no barriers or condition. It does not build frontiers and does not remember offenses. And for me, that is very beautiful, to see, that really God takes all what we have, and it doesn't matter for Him whether it's too little. He will multiply it. And I would like to also share with you these 4 important words that we can see in the gospel. Actually, there are 4 important verbs which Jesus did after this. Those words are taken, blessed, broken, and given. So in the passage, we can see that Jesus took the bread, He blessed them, He broke it and gave it to the people. This author, Henry Nouwen, I'm sure that you know him. He was a Dutch author who wrote many books, but one of the books that he wrote about this is on the life of the beloved. And he says that in the Last Supper, these 4 verbs are the summary of Jesus' life as the beloved. And this also summarizes our own life as beloved children of God, that we are like the bread. We are taken, we are blessed, we are broken and given. And as I was reflecting on this passage of the multiplication of bread, I found that these are the same action words that Jesus used in Luke. He took the bread and the fish, He blessed them, He broke them, and gave them to the disciples to be distributed. And so Henry Nouwen said that we are all taken, we are all chosen, we are all called by God. He chose us and He set us apart to be His disciples. And this means that we are all precious. We are all precious for Him, whoever we are, whatever background we may have, whatever past, whatever failures, whatever limitations. He chose us, and He blessed us. And in Latin, to bless is called benediction, which means speaking well, or saying good things of someone. And it's true, that we all need affirmation and deep encouragement. But blessing is more than simply praise or appreciation. To give a blessing is to affirm a person's worth and dignity, and to really to affirm, as Nouwen says, a person's belovedness. So when we are blessing, saying good things to others, we are affirming their belovedness. And it's true that we all want the blessing, and God gives us the blessing. often through someone who affirms us, who encourages us, who loves us. So we are truly blessed. And the third one is broken. And this third movement in our lives is very important. We find it harder to deal with our brokenness. But when we know that we have brokenness, our disappointments, wounds, pain, or sadness, we realize that we are human beings, and we all have our sufferings. And in many ways, the church is a community of the broken. We, in the Bourbon Day, we are community of the broken. But we gather to support one another, to share one another, to be honest about brokenness, and to allow our wounds to become really a source of healing for others. So, as Nguyen says, that we are called not to be wounded healers, um, to accept that we are wounded person, but to realize that God will always heal us so that we can heal others. The way to help comes by allowing the pain to deepen until our pain is not an enemy, but a friend. So really, our brokenness becomes a way of connecting with other people. I was mentioning to some of you that I have started a program on re-entry for missionaries who were assigned abroad, and who came back for good here in the Philippines. And in the program that I gave 2 months ago, I was telling the participant that we are all broken in one way or another. We are like broken pots, but God can use our lives so that from our brokenness we can give life to people, so that we can share the life of God to people. And so the fourth word which is given is also an important aspect in our life. When we accept our being chosen and receive the blessing of God, when we accept our brokenness, then we can move away from our self-centeredness and focus on giving. And when we give, we turn our attention to the other person. And this is where our faith becomes strengthened. And this is also the dynamism of our School of the Word. We are here not just to receive. Of course, we are nourishing ourselves by the bread, by the food that we eat. But we become more nourished and we grow in faith as we also share it with people. That's why there's always time for prayer, time to listen, and also the time to share to others. Because this is the mission that God has given to us. Mission is to see our lives as bread, taken, blessed, broken, and given. Of course, this bread is Jesus himself. Later on in the succeeding gospel passages, we will see how Jesus offered himself as the bread of life, as the Eucharist. And Jesus is teaching us how to give our life to him and to abandon our life in God's hands. This small bread can feed thousands of people. And the only thing that God needs us is to abandon our life into his hands. For us missionaries, we start our day praying this prayer of abandonment by Charles de Foucault. Nowadays, when people wake up, the first thing that they do is what? Check the phone, check the messages, check Facebook. How great if at the start of the day, the first thing that we say to God is to abandon our lives. Now, this is a very beautiful prayer. Maybe later on I can share it with you. But it says there, Lord, I abandon my life in your hands. Do with me what you will. Whatever you may do, I thank you. I'm ready for all, accept all. That only your will be done in me, in all your creatures. And I find it very beautiful. And sometimes I just, change the words and to see, how I would like to abandon my life in God's hands. I abandon my life in my poverty. I entrust myself to you, facing my responsibilities. I experience myself very small, very limited, poor, but I know that you will help me. I know that you will provide what I need to carry out my responsibilities. Many times I don't know what to say. Many times I don't know what to do. Many times in front of so many decisions that I have to make, I feel lost. But I know that you will guide me. I know that you will provide for me. So let us abandon our life into God's hands. Offer to God those 5 loaves and 2 fishes, because abandonment is an expression of trust in God's providence. I have experienced it so many times in my life as a missionary, when I didn't know what to give, when I was concerned of the many situations that I face in the apostolate with the missionaries, um, how we will survive in the pandemic. But is to be able to believe in God's providence. And I have experienced thousands of times how God really provides for us. So let us tell God, like what we heard in the song, take my 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Do with it. Do with it as you will. I surrender. And later on, if you have time, you can go through the lyrics of that song, because it's really very beautiful. Sometimes we think that what we have is too small, but God will always multiply, will always bless what we have. And as it says at the end of the song, no gift is too small. So we leave you now with your personal prayer, and take this opportunity to just be in silence with God. Allow Him to talk to you. Allow Him to speak to you in this passage.
Shall we read the gospel first, Sister Grace?
Yes.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him, because he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. When they had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over, so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. Brothers and sisters, this is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.